how to handle losses when trading football. And if you trade any sports at all, this might be the most valuable video you ever watch, because the real biggest challenge that you're ever going to face when trying to become profitable at trading is the challenge of handling losses. But by the time you have watched this video today, you're going to know exactly how to handle losses just like a pro, and this will go a long way towards your eventual success on the Betfair exchange. So coming up in this video training, I'm going to be telling you why losing should actually be seen as a good thing and not a bad thing. I'm going to give you 7 practical strategies for handling the losses. I'm going to be revealing what I do to handle losing myself. I'm going to be also telling you how to bounce back even stronger after losing. Also telling you some typical mistakes that most make when they lose, and much more. And if you stick around till the end of this video, I've also got a freebie for you to download, because I feel that the information I'm going to share in this video is so good it should probably be published in a book. And so what I've done is I've had this put into a PDF transcript. You can read the full transcript of this video in your own time and at your own leisure, because there is probably going to be many times in the future where you're going to need this information once again. So get that transcript as well. But this is for those who stick around to the end. This is going to be a good video. Sit back, relax, and let's get into it. So before we get into the meat of the video, let me ask you a question. Do you like losing? Shout the answer at the screen and let me know if you have to. If you answered yes to this question, then I am going to assume that you are crazy, since nobody actually likes to lose. You cannot find a human being on this planet who actually likes losing anything. And if they say they do like it, then yeah, they are definitely crazy. However, some of us have learned to deal with losing in better ways than others. And being able to handle losing well is almost like having a superpower. And having that power will help you to go far, not just in sports trading, but in all aspects of life. And so if you do want to be able to handle losses well, one of the first things that you need to do is to be able to reframe just what a loss is in your mind, and not see losing something as being a bad thing, but maybe actually seeing it as being a good thing. So before we get started in the actual training, here is a quick exercise to do. I want you to stare at this word losses. You can see the word on the screen, losses, and I want you to stare at it and really stare at it. Don't take your eyes off it and don't even blink. Stare at it until the word loses all meaning. And I want you to realize that losses are not actually what you think they are. You do think losses are a bad thing, but if you stare at this word for long enough, you're soon going to see what losses really are. And if you stared at it for long enough, now you can see what losses really are. They are lessons. Now, I remember when I was younger, I had a mentor who told me that in life, there are no mistakes, just lessons learned. And I guess you could and should take the same approach to sports trading. In sports trading, there are no losses, just lessons. Every loss you take is another lesson. And when you can start to see a loss as a positive thing, it is the first step that you can take towards handling losses. Now, here's another good quote. And this is a quote from John C. Maxwell, who says, "There is no success without failure and losses." And we all want success. That's why we're here, right? But we have to realize and accept that success cannot exist without the existence of failure, without the existence of losses. And this is why losing should actually be seen as a good thing, because every loss you take is actually another step closer to succeeding. And if you're ever going to succeed as a sports trader, you are going to have to take and handle a lot of losses first. And even when you are profitable, on the bottom line, there's still going to be losses. It is just part and parcel of the game. I take losses every single day, every single day. So the sooner you can learn to handle and accept losses, the better, as you won't get very far otherwise. And I often say that being a sports trader is actually similar to being a boxer. You see, when you're a boxer, there's no way you're going to get into that ring and avoid getting hit. It's almost guaranteed that you are going to get hit if you're having a boxing match. And it's very similar to sports trading. A sports trader, when they trade, there is no way you're going to avoid taking a loss. There will be a loss at some point. And as you can see in this image, even the best can take a beating, but it's who wins at the end that counts. So the sooner you accept that you're going to take a loss, the sooner you can work out how to handle it. And if you remember that movie, there was a great quote in that movie as well from Rocky Balboa. I know he's fictional, but it's still a good quote. And it starts here, as you can see on the screen, but this is the main bit. It's all about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward. That is how winning is done. So if you can handle those losses and keep moving forward, then you will eventually succeed. But if you let those losses get to you, then you will be one of those ones who eventually fail or eventually quit. And then you have not succeeded and you haven't won. So whilst trying to reframe losses in your mind is a big help, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. You really have to just work on it going forwards and in the future. And I'm pretty sure right now, and the main reason you're watching this video is because you want some more practical advice about what to do when you do take a loss and how to handle them in the best way. So that's what we're going to get into right now. And I've actually broken this down into how to handle losses into three different sections. So it's how to handle losses in the short term, the medium term, and the long term, because there isn't one single way that you should handle losses. This isn't a magic trick where I could just say, okay, you take a loss, you do this, and that's it. It's all okay. There's actually a short-term way of dealing with it, a medium-term way of dealing with it, and a long-term way of dealing with it. And that's what we're going to get into very, very shortly. But we've all been there at some point. I mean, we're all human. As I said at the start of the video, nobody likes to lose. And when we take a loss, it can bring out lots of different emotions in us, and emotions that I'm sure none of us are really proud of. It can get us angry, annoyed, frustrated, and we end up looking like this guy on the screen. And we know this isn't good for us in any sort of way. It isn't good for our trading. It isn't good for our mental health. And yeah, you could end up like this guy. I mean, you could end up shouting at the screen after an easy chance is missed, or that goal you needed is disallowed because of VAR. But anyway, based on all of this, the first piece of advice I'm going to give is to not let yourself end up like this guy on the screen. And that is, don't let the losses get to you. Okay. Now, I know you're thinking already. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, Ben, this isn't great advice. I knew this already. This is not what I'm here for. But there is actually a way that you can ensure that losses don't actually get to you in the first place, or you can at least minimize the chances of losses getting to you in the first place. And so you might know that those who are experienced and at a professional level with football trading are often able to just accept a losing trade and then move on to the next trade without much extra thought, without actually batting an eyelid. And in the beginning, that is quite hard for a novice to do. And when they do take a loss, it can get to them. It can really get to them, and they end up like the guy on the previous screen. But I've actually observed some of the reasons why a loss can actually get to you. And if you can eliminate these reasons, then you stand a good chance of losses not actually affecting you as badly as they might have in the past. Now, this is something I noticed. Now, if you are staking too big, then when you actually take a loss, it is going to get to you a lot more. It's really going to trouble you mentally. And I have a simple rule with regards to staking, especially when you are starting out with the sports trading. Now, simple rule is, if you look at the money that is lost on the screen, or the money that is at risk at any point, and you actually feel uncomfortable about the money that is being risked, and if you ever take a loss, and then later on that loss is still on your mind, if you experience any of those symptoms, then believe me, you are staking too big. You're staking too big, and you're out of your comfort zone. You are risking money that subconsciously you actually cannot afford. And when you are risking that sort of money, when you actually lose, it's really, really going to affect you mentally. Definitely. And I mean, obviously, when you win, it's going to feel like a great win. but when you lose, it's going to feel like 10 times worse. And I can honestly speak from experience. When I first started out, when I first learned about this football trading thing, I went straight in with 3-figure stakes before I even had a clue about what I was doing. And yeah, it was great if I won and had a winning day. But when I lost, and I remember losing lots of times where I'd lose maybe several hundred on a football match, and I would find that it would really, really bother me. I would get angry. I would want to throw something. I would struggle to sleep that night, especially if it was an evening match or something like that, and I've just taken a big loss. And the fact was, I was just trading way out of my comfort zone. So I mean, what you need to do is to find your comfort zone. So if you experience any of what I've just mentioned, where you feel uncomfortable at any point, then definitely you're staking too big and you need to lower your stakes. And if you ever take a loss and that loss is still bothering you later on, a few hours later, or the next day, then you're definitely staking too big and you just need to lower your bank. Now, I know I'm probably going to get people asking me, what bank should I use? That is all dependent on the individual. You see, a small bank to one person might be £100 bank. A small bank to somebody else might be £1,000 bank. A small bank to somebody else might be a 10k bank. It's all dependent on you. It's all dependent on your financial situation. And to be honest, it all depends on how you actually feel. Like I said, if you feel uncomfortable with the loss that is on the screen or the money that is being risked, and I know, and you know what I mean by feeling uncomfortable. You get that feeling in your stomach and you start to feel a little bit nervous. Then yeah, you are staking too big. You need to go in with a smaller bank and then start moving forward from there. And at the end of the day, you can grow that bank. And as your bank grows, your comfort zone grows. I mean, I spoke about how I lost, a few £100 on a match and I couldn't sleep. I mean, these days I regularly take 3-figure losses and I don't even bat an eyelid. Just move on to the next match and keep it going. So like I said, as your bank grows, your comfort zone is going to grow as well. So if you are experiencing any of that mentioned, lower your bank, start moving forward like that. And believe me, this will help those losses not get to you as much as they might have done in the past. And another reason I see losses get into novices a lot is because they are rushing the learning phase. And sometimes you just have to accept that you are new to this, you're still in the learning phase, and you just got to take those losses. You got to take those losses, learn from it, and then keep improving. And with time and experience, those mistakes and the losses, they're going to start to get lower and lower, and you're going to become more thicker skinned to the losses as well. But when you're in the learning phase, you just got to accept it is all part of the learning curve. And I know former matched bettors who move into trading have a big issue with this. And again, I can relate to that because I came from match betting myself. And with match betting, you were just used to putting the money in, wait until the end of the match and then seeing how much you made, albeit not a lot. Whereas in trading, hey, there's going to be times when you lose and it's going to feel a bit weird to have to maybe record a loss or actually look at your account going down maybe on some days. Maybe you start an account You start the day with your account at a certain level, and it's very realistic that that account by that time the next day could actually have gone down. It could actually be in a negative. Very, very realistic, and it will happen from time to time. So at the end of the day, don't rush the learning phase. If you're trying to rush and learn this very quickly, then when you do get the losses, they're going to get to you a lot more. So perhaps just scale back the expectations. Don't think you're just going to learn this overnight, and accept that losses are all part of the learning curve. And there also can be external factors at play which will really have a big effect on how you handle those losses. And generally, if you're not happy with some other aspect in your life, it could be something at home, something at your job or elsewhere, then it is going to reflect on your trading. And if you sit down and trade and you don't have a total peace of mind, you're sitting and trading and you're in a bad mood, or something's happened earlier in the day which has annoyed you, then it is going to lead to bad decisions. And believe me, when those losses happen, when you're already in a bad mood, you're already irked by something, then it's going to lead to further bad decisions. It's going to lead to you reacting badly, and it is going to lead to those losses getting to you much more than they should. So my advice, honestly, and one thing I always do is I always say I never trade ever if I'm in a bad mood. If something has affected my mood and my mind is not totally focused on the trading, then I stay well away from that screen, because it sounds strange, but you will actually take your mood out on the markets. You'll take your mood out on the markets, and it can lead to overstaking or chasing losses, all the bad stuff, which I'm sure you know usually ends up one way, and that could be blowing a bank or just taking a really, really big loss. So, I mean, if you want to give yourself a good chance that losses won't even bother you at all, then, I mean, look at all of these. Look at all these on the screen. Are you staking too big? If you are, then scale back. Are you rushing the learning phase? Are you trying to run before you can even walk? Think about that as well. And also think about, are there external factors that also might be at play? I mean, sometimes I do get emails from people who have just lost their job. They're not quite at that professional experience level yet with their football trading, but they want to give it a go anyway. And I always say this is not going to end well, because you're going to be doing two of these, or maybe all three of them, to be honest. You might start staking too big, but then you're definitely already rushing the learning phase. You can't go full time without having the experience and the proof of profitability. And then there's going to be external factors, because you just lost your job. You're not going to be totally happy because you just lost your job. I'm sure you probably got either yourself to support or a family, which is just going to add added pressure to the situation. And then when you sit and trade and you get a loss, it is not going to end well, and it is going to be very mentally damaging. So if you want to trade and not let losses get to you in the first place, try and eliminate all of these. Try and stake within your comfort zone. Have the patience. If you are still in the learning phase, just have the patience to just say, hey, I'm still learning. Every loss is a lesson, as we spoke about earlier on. And do eliminate any external factors which could be affecting your trading, and you will do much better, much better, I assure you of that. So we're going to stick with the short-term way of handling losses, as we just touched upon there. You try not to let them get to you in the first place. But now I'm going to tell you what to do immediately after you actually take the loss, after you've actually locked in the loss on the screen, or you've had a match where you've lost a fair bit of money on. This is probably the best way to handle those situations, and this is how I approach it as well. And my advice here is never ever dwell on the actual loss. This is in the short term for sure. Never dwell on the loss. Never dwell on any individual loss. Okay. First thing I always do when I take a loss, I close the market and I eliminate it from my mind. I just want to move on to the next trade, and I just want to keep it going. I do not want that loss I took to affect my next trade, because if I dwell on it, if I stare at that screen and I think about the loss, I think about the money that was lost, I think about what I could have bought with that money, your mind starts to play all sorts of tricks on you. And then it's going to affect the next trade, because you're going to get that voice in your head on the next trade where it's like, I could stake a little bit higher and maybe I could win that money back, because this next trade's definitely going to win, right? This is definitely going to win. No, best thing is to do, close the market, eliminate it from your mind. Don't let it affect the next trade, and just move on quickly. I do have, those who follow me on Twitter will know that there's been people who tweet and ask me to share my losses, because I do share the winning screens from time to time, and they want me to share the losses, which is a fair request. But one of the reasons I don't share the losses is because I'm doing this. I'm not dwelling on them. I'm trading. If I take a loss, close the market, I just move on to the next trade, and I eliminate it from my mind. And I've got to the level now where I can eliminate the memory of a loss so quickly that by the end of the day, when I check over the P&L, I actually look at some matches and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot about that match I was trading. And honestly, it really, really works so well just for your mental well-being when you're trading, because we all know that when you take a loss, you move on to that next trade. There is that voice. It's like that devil on your shoulder that is telling you, go on, do it. Stake a little bit higher. Do it. You can do that. You'll win it all back. That loss won't even affect you. It won't make any difference. But the best thing is to not let that previous loss affect your next trade. And here is an extra tip. And this is pretty much what I do when I do take a loss in the moment. And it is pretty much, as this guy from Shark Tank is saying on the screen, that match, that event is dead to me. I say you are dead to me, and I move on to the next match. Now, here is a tip, because I see a lot of people having big problems with this. Now, if I've locked in a loss on a match, then if that match is still active and I've closed that match for a loss and I'm not going to trade it anymore, maybe I've hit my maximum loss for that match, then like I said, I consider it dead to me. And that means I close the market. The market is gone. It's cleared off my favorites on Betfair or whatever. The market is gone for sure. If the match is on the TV, I either turn the TV off or I just change the channel. I also change the flash scores notifications. That is for sure. And if it's a really big match, I might even have to just turn my phone off, because I do get friends who text me during really big matches as, you know, talking points happen or goals go in. So I do not want to know anything more about that match in that particular time. And primarily, this is because I do not want to be reminded about the loss. Like I said, I don't want to dwell on the loss to the point where it's going to affect my next trades. But also, I also don't want to be aware if the match happens to turn around and the goal that I was looking for or the result I needed then happens after I've got out of the market, then it's going to affect me mentally. And it's really going to affect my further trades, and it might even affect my trade in the next day. So the best thing for me is to just say that that match is dead to me. It is completely dead to me. I move on and I start trading all the other matches, and then I only ever check the result and what happened in that match at the end of the day. And I promise you, when you take this approach and you just check that the final scores later that night or maybe even the next morning, and you see what happened, you see that the match did turn in your favor as soon as you got out of the market, it's not going to annoy you. And it's not going to annoy you to the point where you're actually just going to laugh. You're going to be like, oh, yeah, see, it turned around. That's just my luck. But it's not going to affect your trading on that previous day, because you're not trading anymore. And then you're no longer in the heat of the moment. So it's definitely not going to have as much of a negative effect on you. And this is what happens to me. Sometimes I'm involved in matches. I get out of the market because I'm waiting for a goal. The goal doesn't look like it's going to come, so I get out of the market. And then only when I check the scores later on that night, I see, do you know what? A goal came literally 1 minute after I got out of the market. Now, if I knew about that at the time, then that would really, really bother me mentally. But when I see it later on that day or the next day, I just roll my eyes and laugh. Like I said, I'm no longer in the heat at the moment, so it doesn't bother me and it won't affect my trade in the next day. It's actually more of a laughing talking point than anything. So, I mean, I do get a lot of emails from members who do put themselves in that situation where they're using one of the strategies from my course, such as Fireball, where we're in the market for a certain amount of time. We're looking for a goal. When the goal doesn't arrive, then you have to close the trade. You have to be disciplined to get out of the market. But sometimes, as soon as you get out of the market, the goal goes in. And I do get a lot of my members who email me saying how annoyed they are because they got out and then a goal came 1 minute later on. But this is the advice I give to them. I say, hey, as soon as you get out of the market, that match is dead to you. Close the market, turn off the TV, and then close all the notifications, and don't torture yourself by watching the rest of the match and then seeing what you could have won. Definitely don't do that. So like I said, this is a very good approach. This is something that's worked very well for me, and it helps me to handle those losses. And so we've spoken about not letting the losses get to you in the first place, and then I've talked to you about how I handle the losses in the moment. But if you feel that the loss has bothered you in some way, and you actually feel that it is going to affect your future trades, then this is the best advice I could give you with dealing with losses. And it is, take a break. Very, very simple stuff. But I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this video that have not taken a break at moments when they know they really should have, and they've gone on to do something silly like overstaking, maybe blow the bank, or just taking a really big loss. But honestly, taking a break when you feel that you are mentally affected by an earlier loss is one of the best things you could ever do when you are a sports trader. And the main reason for this is that you prevent yourself from going on tilt. Now, you might not know this term of going on tilt. It actually comes from poker, where if you're sitting at the poker table, you're taking part in a tournament or a cash game, and maybe, as can happen in poker, you get a bad loss. Sometimes you get a really unlucky hand where you lose a lot of chips for a silly reason. And usually when it's a bad loss, that can be what affects you mentally. And a lot of poker players then go what is called on tilt, where they get angry, and then it starts leading to them making even more bad decisions, which causes them to lose even more. If you've ever played poker, then you will have seen someone go on tilt, and you probably would have gone on tilt yourself. I'm pretty sure. When I used to play poker, it happened to me all the time. See, in poker, it's hard to walk away from the table, especially if you're involved in a tournament. You can't actually walk away. You have to stick there till the end. In a cash game, you could walk away, but in poker, it is quite hard because you have to physically walk away from the table. But in football trading, we don't have to walk away from anything. As I touched upon in the last piece of advice, you just have to turn off the screen to get away with it. Close the market, turn off the screen, go and trade another match, or like we're talking about in this strategy here, just take a break. Take a break. The best way to handle losses is to prevent further losses. So take a break, finish for the day, and try and do something else. And sometimes, depending on how bad the loss is, you might have to avoid anything to do with that particular sport that you were trading. I remember back in the day when I was still learning the ropes with football trading. Now, one thing I always loved to do on Saturday nights is watch Match of the Day. But if I had a losing day, I couldn't watch Match of the Day because it would just remind me of the bad days trading that I had. I mean, it was great to watch Match of the Day after a profitable day, but after a losing day, I just couldn't watch Match of the Day at all. And I would have to really just stay away from football. I'd have to just go and do something else to really take my mind off it. And the good thing about this is that you are recharging mentally when you do that. If you just avoid any sort of talk, avoid looking at the Betfair account, avoid anything to do with trading, just for the rest of the day. It doesn't have to be too long, to be honest. It could just be till the end of the day. Then you will recharge mentally, and you will feel a lot fresher and a lot better about things when you wake up the next day. And you shouldn't have that feeling of, I want to try and win it all back. That feeling should be gone if you've really recharged mentally. And I mean really have taken your mind off things. But yeah, you shouldn't have that feeling of, I want to try and win all that money back. You shouldn't have those negative feelings. And to be honest, if they are still there, then you might have to take a longer break than was first thought. You might have to take a whole day off. And you should really just stay away from the markets as much as you can, because it will really help with your discipline, and it will help with handling the losses. And as I touched upon here, the best way to handle losses is to prevent further losses. And they are going to happen when you're not when you are mentally unhinged, which is what can happen when you are on tilt. I have seen some incredible meltdowns back when I used to play poker, when a player goes on tilt. And I've experienced meltdowns myself back in the early days of my own football trading, where, hey, I took one loss, and it's like, let me try and win that back on the next match. Oh, that didn't work. All right, let's throw the whole bank in. If this wins, then this is great because I'm back level for the day. And of course, sometimes that would work, but sometimes it wouldn't. And you'd have a very harsh and expensive lesson learned there. So yeah, take a break is some of the best advice you could get. If a loss is bothering you mentally, then step away from the screen. So that's basically the best advice I can give you on how to handle losses in the short term and in the moment. And now we're going to look at how to handle losses in the medium term. And this is usually the next day or the cold light of day, where we can look at our trades with a level head. We're no longer trading, but we want to look at the losses that we took and try and assess what went wrong. So we're going to look at the medium-term ways of dealing with losses right now. But by the way, I do want to say, if any of these tips so far have been helpful to you, or you find anything useful from this video, then please leave a comment. Especially if you have any of your own way of dealing with losses, then please do leave a comment below. It would be great to hear them as well. But this is a medium-term way of handling losses, and that is to accept responsibility. You have to accept responsibility for the loss. At the end of the day, you made the decision to enter the market, and you have to accept it is nobody else's fault but your own. It's not the striker who missed the penalty, the referee who sent a player off controversially. It's not VAR. It's not the fault of the tipster that you follow on Twitter. And also, you have to realize the world is not conspiring against you either. And yes, I literally have had people email me wondering if the markets were fixed against them personally. But yeah, you have to accept responsibility. You really, really have to accept responsibility. You have to absolutely own it. You have to literally put your hands up and say, it was me, I did it, it was my fault, and I am guilty as charged. You cannot blame others. So my advice is own the loss. Own the loss. And this is probably for your own mental well-being more than anything, because generally in life, I mean, if you keep blaming something else or someone else, then it's not going to end well. So you need to admit that it was you, and admit that it was a bad trade, or if it was a good trade which went bad, but just don't blame anything and anyone else. No matter what you do, you have to be strong enough to always do this, because if it is always someone else's fault, then you will never get anywhere in trading and in life. And until you understand that, you will find it very hard to progress, because you're always going to be searching for an excuse. And most importantly, you will never feel like you're able to control your destiny or your own future, because you're always going to say, well, it was because of this, it was because of that. And let's face it, we have all met those people who blame everyone else for their current situation. Do not end up like them. When you take a loss, accept responsibility, and believe me, you will find it much easier to handle mentally. And if you cast your mind back to the start of the video, remember what we said. Losses are really actually lessons, and the only way it can be a lesson is if you learn from it. So the next thing to do, if you're going to handle losses in the best way, is to analyze the loss. Really, really go over it in the cold light of day. Take the time to analyze the loss, or the losses, depending on what exactly happened. And this way, you can actually start to work out what went wrong, if anything at all did go wrong. Now, you should be analyzing all your trades anyway, but when you take losses, you probably need to take a bit more time to see what actually went wrong with the trade. And now you've accepted responsibility for the trade, you need to assess whether or not you actually made a bad trade at all, because just because a trade lost doesn't mean it was a bad move. And this is something that many novices do misunderstand at all. Many assume that if it lost, that means it was a bad call, but it's not quite as simple as that. So honestly, what you need to do is you need to look at the trade that you did, and then you need to ask yourself, honestly, did I make a mistake? I think this is one of the best questions to ask yourself, because there are times when I spot a good value opportunity, I get in the market, but what I need to happen simply doesn't happen, and I have to take the loss. But did I make a mistake? No, I didn't make a mistake at all, because if that situation comes up again, then I would take the same trade, and more than likely over the longer term, I'm going to hit the winners. So from my own experiences, the losses that really, really bother me the most are the ones that I label as being silly and where I have made a mistake. Like if I'm involved in a match and I think a goal is coming and I get into the market, and then the match starts to play really slowly, there's little to no attempts on goal, no attacking motivation, and I sit there and I stay in the market thinking that the goal is going to come for whatever reason. I mean, you see it happen all the time with novices, not actually believing what they're seeing on the screen. Now, that is the type of loss that is going to really, really bother me later on, because that is a mistake. It wasn't a good value entry point. It wasn't a good market to be in. Now, if the opposite happens, where I get in the market expecting a goal to happen, and then it's end to end, you're seeing shots cleared off the line, a striker misses an open goal, penalties missed, goals disallowed, all sorts of stuff happening, but the goal doesn't arrive, then I don't feel like I made a mistake. I feel like I picked a good value entry point. And I know that if I keep picking entry points like that, more often than not, there's going to be a goal and I'm going to get the winning trade. You're not going to win every single trade you get into, but the loss is not actually going to bother me, because I'm going to ask myself this question. Did I make a mistake? I didn't make a mistake there. I made a mistake on the previous scenario where I just stayed in the market and didn't believe what I was seeing. But on the second scenario, I didn't make a mistake. And of course, some mistakes are more clear cut. I mean, sometimes it could just be that you've let the trade run too long. You didn't stick to your strategy. Maybe you staked a bit too much. Maybe you thought you would try something new and it didn't pay off. I mean, those are more likely to make you angry, because deep down, you're going to know that it was a silly trade. It was a silly mistake. It was a mistake you shouldn't have made. But the best thing is that you can learn from it. And all my members of Ultimate Football Trading, when they sign up, I give them a spreadsheet where they can record all of their trades. And one of the best parts of the spreadsheet is actually the notes section. And I see some of my members use this section really, really well to write notes about the actual trade. And some members have actually said it to me, where they've openly admitted that, hey, the reason the trade went wrong was because they made a mistake and they know not to do that again. And basically, they've done this. They've turned those losses into lessons. And this is what you need to do. If you really, really want to handle losses in the best way, then turn those losses into lessons, like we spoke about right at the start of this video. Now, there are two ways of looking at losing trades, and it's positive or negative. So you could look at a loss, look at all the negatives, such as the money you've lost, the damage to your bank, and the blow to your ego, which is also a factor, because no one likes to be wrong. Or you could look at the big positive, and that is the lesson that you are going to learn from it. Now, many football traders, I find this, they're fascinated, or some would say obsessed, with data and statistics about the performance of certain football teams, but the novices don't seem as interested about the data and statistics about their own performance when it comes to trading. I'm pretty sure a lot of novice football traders will watch the highlights and will gladly watch Match of the Day to see how Liverpool played, or Man City or something like that. But will they take the time to look over each trade they did that day and then look at their own highlights and their own lowlights, if you can call it that, to look at their mistakes and then learn from their mistakes? Because, like I said, the best thing that can come from a loss is the lesson that you learn from it. So if you made a silly mistake that caused the loss, then it's an easy lesson to learn. Very easy lesson, because you just know, hey, that was a silly mistake. I'm not going to do that again. that is for sure. But sometimes when you analyze a losing trade, you also realize how you could have handled that situation better. There might have been a better strategy for that particular situation, and you can learn from that, and you'll know when that scenario comes up the next time, you could approach it differently. You could approach it with a different strategy. Maybe getting involved in a different market might be the best way to do it, but you're only going to learn from the experiences, and you're only going to learn by taking these losses in the first place. And so by taking those losses, it can help you to, in the future, eradicate your mistakes. It can also help you to create a better plan, and it can help you to turn your weakness into a strength. I mean, firstly, it can help you to identify where your weaknesses are. We all have weaknesses within our trading, and once you spot that weakness, you then have the opportunity to improve it, and you could then turn it into a strength, or at least turn it into something that doesn't actually cost you money. And we've seen examples of this from the real sporting world, and we saw this with Liverpool in the 2018 Champions League final. We saw that their goalkeeper, Karius, pretty much cost them the final with two very, very silly mistakes. And to be honest, it was pretty well known that Liverpool's weakness was their goalkeeper at that point. But by taking that loss in the Champions League final, it probably confirmed to Jurgen Klopp that he needed a new goalkeeper. And he learned from that loss. He took that loss, he learned from it, and he turned his weakness into one of his team's main strengths by signing one of the best goalkeepers in the world. And this season, currently, Liverpool actually have the best record in the league for clean sheets, and their goalkeeping the goalkeeping side of things has been much improved. And this is just an example of why losing is actually necessary if you want to improve, as long as you take a lesson from the loss. So hopefully you found some of that information on how to handle losses in the short term and the medium term to be quite useful. Now we're going to look at how you can handle losses in the long term, and in particular if you're on some sort of losing run. And the best advice I can give is to use some perspective. Use perspective. Look at the bigger picture. And one of the main reasons I encourage all my members to track their results religiously on their spreadsheets is because the data doesn't lie. So if you are on a losing streak, you've had a bad day, a losing week, sometimes it can just be a case of zooming out and looking at your overall results, and more often than not realizing you're actually still in profit overall, and maybe you're just experiencing a bit of a downswing and a bit of variance, which can very often happen, and it is definitely going to happen. But at the same time, you can also clearly see if something isn't working after a larger amount of trades, and you can turn those losses into a lesson and look at ways to tweak and improve it. But sometimes after a bad run, it is just a matter of getting some perspective. So ask yourself some of these questions. Are you profitable overall? If you are profitable in the long term, then the short-term losses or the downswings shouldn't get to you. And I see this happens so much that it really is amazing, where someone will start to practice with a strategy. They will be in profit with it, but as soon as a bad run comes along, they will abandon that strategy and then move on to something else, even though they're still in profit overall. And I mean, I say it's crazy, but I've been there myself. I've been there myself and done it myself. Those who are on my mailing list will know that I've shared a few stories about back in the day when I was learning football trading, where I would get a strategy, it would be profitable, but I would, as soon as there was a few losers or something like that, I would just try and do something else. And I cannot explain for the life of me why, because now I'm much older and more mature, and I realize, hey, if you find something that's profitable, just stick with it. Yeah, there will be downswings, but you got to stick with it. Just stick with it and get through those bad runs. Don't just suddenly jump to another strategy or another sport in some cases with some people. So ask yourself that question. Are you profitable overall with whatever you're doing? And if you are, then it doesn't matter about these losses. Keep going only until the point where then when you're in the negative, and then it can be time to start looking at tweaking stuff. But that's the first question to ask yourself. And I mean, if we're going to talk about using perspective, it could go even deeper than that. Ask yourself this to really put any sort of losing streak into perspective, or any sort of loss. Will that loss bankrupt you? And when I mean bankrupt you, I don't mean your Betfair bank. I mean, will it bankrupt you, the losing streak that you're on? Is it going to mean that you have no money left to eat? More than likely, the answer is no. More than likely, it's not going to bankrupt you. It's not going to affect your outside life. And if it does, then there's a big problem there already, which you need to address. But more than likely, it's not going to bankrupt you. It's not going to affect your regular lifestyle or anything like that if you take a few losses on the Betfair exchange. So it shouldn't bother you. And ask yourself this question as well. Does your happiness depend on sports trading, depend on you winning at sports trading? More than likely it doesn't. More than likely you have much more important things in your life that really, really, truly make you happy. And sports trading is just a fun way of you making some extra money, or for some people who are still learning, just a fun hobby. But it's very, very unlikely that your happiness totally depends on you winning at sports trading. And again, if your happiness does depend on it, then you've probably got bigger problems, and this isn't the video for you right now. But more than likely, your happiness doesn't depend on sports trading. So ask yourself that question when you take this loss. When you look at the much bigger picture, is it really that important? And it will help you to handle those losses when they do come along. You'll start to realize how silly you are by overreacting and getting angry when you do take a loss. So there's been quite a few tips shared in this video about how to handle losses, and I hope there is something that everyone can learn from this. Remember, right at the start we spoke about how you can prevent the losses from getting to you in the first place, and I think that there is some really good advice in there that a lot of people can take something from, because I think if you start to get number one nailed down, then the rest should be a lot easier, because it is just not letting them get to you in the first place, and maybe scaling down your stakes, or just accepting that you're still learning, all that sort of stuff. Go back to number one if you want to refresh on that. But remember, then we spoke about not dwelling on the loss in the moment. Very important, because you don't want it to affect your future trades and your mental well-being as you are trading. But if your mental well-being is affected, then of course just take a break for the rest of the day, maybe even take a couple days break if you really need it. And then we spoke about accepting responsibility. This is very important for your mental well-being. You need to stand up and admit that you got it wrong, and it was you and only you that made the decision. Accept the responsibility and then learn from it. Analyze the losses, turn those losses into lessons, and ultimately use perspective to really help you to handle those losses and not let it really get to you in the longer term. But there was 7, and like I said, I did promise 7 techniques for handling losses at the start of this video. But you know what? I've got one more bonus tip that I'm going to leave you with, and that is to get back in the game. Like I said earlier, sports trading is easy when you're winning, but it is how you handle the losing that is going to determine your fate in this game. Do you let it get to you? Do you make it abandon your strategy and then you start from scratch? Do you quit because you're losing? Do you just give up? Hopefully not, because you need to get back in the game. You need to learn from the losses, and you need to bounce back even stronger. And you see this play out even with elite athletes. There is a reason why Man City and Liverpool are the 2 top teams in the country this season, and the main reason is because of how they respond to defeats. You saw both of them have lost matches this season, and I think both of them have lost 2 matches on the bounce. But they took those losses, and I'm not sure if you noticed, but a lot of them, especially Manchester City, came back even stronger than before they took those losses. They didn't let those losses get to them, and it takes a lot of mental belief. And this is the difference between being elite and being average. It is how you handle those losses and those bad times. And we've got a great quote from the greatest of all time, and he said, "You don't lose if you get knocked down, you lose if you stay down." And that was Muhammad Ali with, very great quote. And it is very true. If you get knocked down, which you're going to get knocked down a lot when you're trading sports, there's going to be a lot of losses, but you're only going to lose if you stay down and you let those losses get to you. And that basically wraps it all up. But as promised, for those who watch to the end, I do have a free PDF transcript of this whole video for you to download and then read in your own leisure time. And you can refresh from time to time whenever you feel that you need the information. And you don't have to constantly refer back to this video. So the link to download this is in the description for this video. So you just have to scroll down and check out the description for this video. I'm also going to leave the link in the comments section as well as soon as I get time. But just click on that link and it will be emailed direct to your inbox. So this is definitely worth grabbing while it is available. And like I said, this is great to just refresh your mind about how to handle losing from time to time. So definitely do grab that while you can. And anyway, thanks for watching. It's been a very fun video to do. Very different from the usual videos that we do. But if you do like this video and you do like anything to do with sports trading and football trading, then hit the subscribe button. And also check the links in the description for your freebie. And also check these videos as well. There's more videos on this channel which are just as good as this, and you will enjoy watching those too. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.